Okay, here I am in the game plot. Here we are with a blank game plot, and we want to do something with waves. So waves have a curvy shape. So let's go look at Shape Creator, and it's not a triangle, it's not a polygon, it's a curve. How do we use this curve tool? The curve tool lets us draw individual segments of a curve. So we can click on any of the points that define the curve, and we can click on the arrows to move that point. So I'm going to move this. I move this way back here to -200. The second point, the first point of the pull is you can imagine it as being a point where you're pulling a string that's attached to a piece of rubber going between this point and this point. So if we pull down, then our line bends down. And this isn't a very good wave shape. And the wave's probably too long. Okay, maybe that's okay for a wave, but we need another one. So okay, this is a pretty big wave. Now we can pull this one down. We can get two similarly shaped waves. And if I have a big piece of ocean, what I'll want to do is complete it with a box. So I'm going to pull that down. If these points that we're pulling to coincide with the endpoints of that segment, then we get sharp corners. Now, if we want to see what that will look like, I can turn off the curve helper here, and I can change the color. So obviously, we hope our waves are not that color. So there's the blue color. Make it a darker blue. Oh, that's a pretty good blue color. So here we have a bit of wave, but if we need to have lots of waves, it's going to take a long time to create the wave this way. So wouldn't it be better if we could write a little program that would create this wave? So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this in here. Call this two waves. We don't need that. And, oh, well, there's, our wave is so big, we can't see it. So let's move it over. Okay, so there's our pretty big wave. Now, if we want to make little waves, we're going to need to have many, many copies of this, but basically following the same pattern. So the points that we go through are on the top and we pull down. So let's make a function that will create something like that. So let's call this many waves. And we can decide how many waves we want. So we could make that an input. And we'll start with just finding the places where we're going to put the tops of these waves. Okay, so we need a bunch of points. we're going to start with a list of numbers. And there's a function, list.range, that will give us a bunch of numbers. So we'll take numbers from 0 to num waves. And we'll have a width for those waves. We'll take those numbers and we will apply a function to each of those numbers to turn it into a position, and then we'll draw a point at that position. Okay, so to save space in my program, I'm going to, instead of making a function with a name, I'm going to make what's called an anonymous function using this backward slash, which says, this is a function, these are the inputs, and this is what you're going to do with it. So the first thing we need to do with it is turn it into a floating point number. So it can be fractional, and we can use it for positions. Then we'll multiply that by the width. So that will move our points to the right position. And we don't want, right now, the first point is going to be 0. So, I mean, we could just make it go from negative num waves to positive num waves, and that will be fine, except this is really now half of the number of waves. But that's pretty easy to understand now. Instead of just being a number, we're going to make it a point by adding a y coordinate. Now let's just check that that compiles. Okay, it doesn't do anything yet. We're not using it. So we can take those points and we can make them into circles, or we can draw a circle at each of those positions. So now we've got a list of positions. So we're going to take that position and we're going to draw a circle there, make it red, and we're going to move to that position. Okay, so let's put in here many waves. Now it's not really many waves, it's just many points. Oh, and this is a list of shapes. So when we're finished with that, let's group it. Oh, and we forgot to tell it how many waves. So let's try having 10 waves of size 10. Okay, so here are the positions that we can use for the tops of the waves. And we're going to turn each of those into one of these. Instead of drawing a circle there, we're going to turn it into a pole. So now we're going to need the X and the Y, and we're going to need the X and the Y because we're going to have to pull somewhere in addition to ending the segment there. So remember, we want to pull somewhere below the line of those points and somewhere in between the two. So since somewhere in between the two, so we'll take X and we'll subtract, let's say we'll subtract 70% of whatever the width is from it, and we will go down an amount equal to the width. Let's see what that looks like. Now this will give us a bunch. This will give us a bunch of poles. So we could do this with these kind of anonymous functions, but it will get harder to understand the code. So the point is to make code easier to understand. So we're going to give that a definition instead. So now we have our poles. And we're going to put that into a curve. So this is what the curve looks like. So we can start at, we might as well start the same way. Somewhere way off to the left, then we're going to have our poles. So we'll have, let's call this, well, let's leave them poles. So those are really just the wave poles. Then we've got to add some more. So we need to add the one that's down. We need to add the one on the lower right and on the lower left. So what does lower right mean? That means we're just going to make it off the screen. So 150 for X and minus 90 for Y. And then we'll something to the left, minus 150, minus 90, minus 150, minus 90. Okay. Now we've got a similar kind of curve, and we'll fill it with that same wave color. Okay, and now we've got a bunch of waves. We don't need our two waves anymore. Okay, now if we wanted this to be more exciting, we could have the waves move. And there are different ways of doing that. But the easiest thing to do is to move, and we're going to use one of the functions from the animation slot. So let me compile this, go to the animation slot, and we're going to use repeat duration. So, or speed, distance, start position, time. Let's use this one, repeat distance. Oops. Okay, this isn't available in the game slot, so if we want it, we're going to have to copy it over. So let's try repeat duration, repeat distance. Oh, oops, we can't use that without repeat duration. So I'm going to take both of them, switch back to the game slot, and we're going to have repeat distance. So how fast are we going to go? We can try going 10 units per second. How far are we going to go? We're going to go 10, distance of 10. Well, actually, yeah, we don't have a variable for that 10, so we're just going to put in 10 for now. So distance, start position, we can start at 0 and pass in model.time. We're not going up or down. And that is pretty good. But here we're able to see that there's a problem. So if I scale this down by 80%, okay, we can see what's going on. I didn't make enough of these waves. So we're seeing that this is not really, let's scale it down by a half. So you can see we didn't really make we didn't make waves all the way across the top because some of them are off the screen, but we didn't make quite enough. So if we increase num waves, we increase that to 13 waves. Now we've got more waves, and if we get rid of the scale, now it looks perfect. Now, if we were making a scene and we wanted to have multiple rows of waves, we do it this way. And we move the waves up, say by 20, then we're only going to see one set of waves. Actually, we should have moved it down by 20, but still, we only see one set of waves. What we need to do is we need to have changes in the colors of the waves. So we can do that by putting in a color. So that color is now an input, and we can put in that color, and we can change one of these, maybe make it 240. Maybe that's not enough for us to be able to tell the difference. 200. Okay, so now we see we've got two colors of waves. I guess it doesn't look, well, it's okay, but let's change it to 120, take some of the green out of there. Okay, I think that looks better. Now, if they're in the distance, the waves closer are going to be moving faster. So the waves farther away are going to be moving a bit more slowly, but they're also going to look smaller. So we should scale to get them to look smaller. So now you can see the ones in the front are moving slightly faster than the ones in the back. So this is how we can create a scene with waves. And what do we need to save ourselves a lot of typing? We need this function, list.map, and we need list.range. So this gives us a list of numbers. This one takes the numbers and it maps this function over them. The function turns each number into a point, which is a pair of numbers. And then the next function turns those points into the poles. We could have done it with one function, I guess. And then we take those poles, which give us the waves along the top. We only need to add two more poles in order to turn it into a box with a wavy top. And then we put as many of those as we want. We use repeat distance in order to get them to move. And by having the distance that they move equal to the width of the waves, you can't really tell that it's actually going forwards and jumping back, because it jumps back to exactly the same position of the waves. Okay, so there's code for waves, and we'll put that on the game example so that you can modify it and use it in your own scene.